Now, a lot of us have heard of the concept that cannabis is a gateway drug, a term that seems to have been designed to instill this notion that cannabis exposure causes individuals to seek out harder and harder substances, potentially engaging in more risk-taking in general. Now, some of us have also started to hear that cannabis seems to help individuals come off other drugs or operate as an exit drug. Now, I'm here to tell you today and definitively that the latter is most likely true. How do I know? Because I have the data to show it. Welcome back to the planet's premier medical cannabis education channel. As always, unabashedly brought to you by the University of New Mexico's Medical Cannabis Research Fund. Now, this notion of how cannabis use affects our motivation in seeking out of other substances is obviously important. For one, it's important to understand how this affects our youth as they transcend across development with all the types of environmental pressures that we have around us. Likewise, it's important to understand how cannabis use affects otherwise normative primal sensitivities that humans have to become addicted to different types of substances. And for patients, it is important for them to understand how cannabis use affects the motivation to use other types of medications and how the use of multiple medications interact together in terms of patient outcomes, including the potential for negative side effects and the potential for additive benefits across different medication classes. Now, certainly there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and even some large retrospective self-reported surveys that suggest that when given the opportunity, patients will oftentimes substitute many different classes of medications in favor of using cannabis. This is also an observation I must say that I have quite frequently, in that patients will often describe coming off of many different types of medications once they start using cannabis regularly. Coincidentally, quite a few patients have also told me that once they make this switch, that their organs start functioning better, and their actual lab screens and tests on organ functioning start returning back to normal, which is just further evidence that many of these conventional prescription classes of medications are just absolutely toxic for our bodies. Now, there's nothing wrong with anecdotal evidence or retrospective measurement of self-reported information, experiences, or memories. But unfortunately, scientifically, this method of measurement can be flawed, particularly when it involves human biases to sometimes even implicitly promote one's own personal and current behaviors in ways that can confound our ability to objectively compute our own past behaviors. Obviously, this sometimes results in overzealous advocacy for the types of behaviors that mimic our current lifestyles. What we did to overcome these limitations was measure the actual number of Schedule 2 through 5 prescription medications that patients were prescribed over an extended period of time prior to and following admittance into a state-level medical cannabis program. We contrasted their usage rates with that of patients that had a similar chronic pain diagnosis and were also given the opportunity to enroll in the state-level medical cannabis program, but ultimately decided not to enroll. So essentially, we were able to measure how the decision to enter into a program and to start using cannabis ultimately affects the likelihood that a patient will obtain different classes of medications. Now, the four main outcome variables of interest in this particular study were the absolute number of Schedule 2 through 5 prescription medications, the number of different classes of medications, the number of times that medications were prescribed, and the absolute number of provider visits that patients engaged over a 24-month observation period. What we found is that for all four outcome variables of interest, patients that decided not to enroll in the cannabis program ultimately experienced relatively stable rates across the observation period. In contrast, those patients that did decide to enroll and to start using cannabis, particularly at the point of enrollment, on average, experience sharp declines in the values of each of those 4 outcome variables of interest. So what do these graphs tell us? Well, it is likely that cannabis usage is going to have a major impact on a whole bunch of people in many different types of ways. For one, you providers out there should probably take notice that your patients are going to be less likely to visit you, essentially to need you on average less frequently if they decide to consume medical cannabis more regularly. Likewise, what we're showing is essentially a revealed preference for substituting many different classes of medications, oftentimes used to treat different types of health conditions, and sometimes even to supplement or to buffer or to remedy from the negative side effects of other medications, all in favor of using medical cannabis. This is likely the outcome of patients coming to appreciate the relative efficacy for negative side effect trade-offs that cannabis allows relative to conventional medications, once given the legal opportunity to do so. And I do believe that that is key. That is, once patients have the legal opportunity and access to medical cannabis, it allows them to have the confidence to relinquish the use of other types of conventional medications that they may find inferior in terms of the relative negative side effects to potential efficacy trade-offs. So can I suggest that everybody out there ultimately switch from all the prescription medications in favor of only using medical cannabis? Of course not. Obviously, these are individual medical decisions based on our individual life experiences, and oftentimes us weighing the relative negative side effects that we've endured from these medications against any potential medicinal benefit or value that we've experienced. Now, what I can do is offer you, and sincerely so, all the best in this venture. It's quite an adventure and certainly a challenge that we all must proceed. As always, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, becoming a patron to this channel, or even becoming a donor to the Medical Cannabis Research Fund, where we are working very hard at the University of New Mexico and beyond to conduct cutting-edge research that will endow you with sound, objective information that you could use to make the best possible medical decisions. I do believe that together, that we are changing the world.